If you're a Pokemon fan, chances are Sun and Moon's Hau'Oli city music has probably been stuck in your head for the last 2 weeks, and with good reason. The melody is catchy, the harmony is simple yet effective, and the ukulele orchestration gives it a fun in the sun sort of feeling. You may also be familiar with the night version of this tune, which trades in the poolside ukuleles for a hotel bar jazz trio. These two pieces are the perfect case study for the topic of today's video: 5 tips for jazz reharmonization. For those who aren't in the know, reharmonization, or reharm as the cats call it, is when you take the melody of a tune and write completely new chords to go with it. People do this for a variety of reasons: to rearrange a song in a new style, to make a song easier to solo over, to make a song harder to solo over, or to create day and night versions of a town theme. The vast majority of reharmonization happens in a jazz context, as in usually it's used to transport a non-jazz song into the jazz style, or to update an old jazz standard with some more modern jazz harmony. So enough talking, let's get to it. 5 tips for jazz reharmonization. Point number 1. Chord extensions. One of the most important things for making a song sound like jazz is using chord extensions. As in jazz, the default is to make each chord a 7th chord, and then add more colors on top as you see fit. That's why you'll see in the night theme that every chord includes its 7th, while in the day theme, these colors are used very sparingly. The night theme at first looks and sounds a lot different from the day theme, but if you isolate the strong measures, you'll see that the basic harmonic structure of the tune has hardly been changed aside from the added extensions. It has been decorated, however, which brings us to our next point. Point number 2. Decorate your target chords. In tonal music, the harmony's job is to take us musically from one place to another, and this is basically impossible to do without having someplace to go. When reharmonizing, it's enormously helpful to have some target chords laid out first, so then you can write the chords leading up to them knowing where you're supposed to end up. In deciding to keep the 3 chord where it was in the day theme, we can approach it with, say, a chromatic walkdown. Or, after deciding that we're going to come back to the 1 chord at the top, we can approach it with something a little less conventional. Actually, this move of flat 6 major to flat 6 diminished to 1 is kind of a motif that's used throughout the night theme, which brings us to our next point. Point number 3. Create new motifs. All too often, I hear beginner reharms that jump all over the place trying to make each bar as cool as possible without really adding anything of substance to the original piece. This just ends up making your reharm sound like a reharm, as opposed to a piece of music in its own right. To avoid this, try to add some original motifs to the music. It doesn't have to be anything too big, just something to give your reharm its own character. The night theme is actually pretty good at this. The intro, which is pretty different from the day themes, introduces us right away to this flat 6 major to flat 6 diminished to 1 idea, which is played around with throughout the piece. Another harmonic motif that gets added is this non-functional dominant 2 chord, first introduced in the chromatic walkdown to the 3 chord I mentioned earlier, which keeps popping up as well. These chords are weird because they don't act at all how you would expect a dominant 2 to act, even in a traditional jazz context, but it works because of the repetition. We hear this E natural to E flat movement so many times throughout the song that we just get used to it and it stops sounding weird. Speaking of sounding weird, on to our next point. Point number 4, take the melody to a new place. A very common and very effective method of reharmonizing is isolating a melody note or group of melody notes and figuring out all of the different chord tones it or they could be. For instance, say you have a big fat 1 in the melody. That could be the root of the 1 chord, it could be the third of the 6 chord, like in the day theme, it could be the 9th of the flat 7 dominant chord, or it could be the flat 13th of the 3/7 altered chord, and on and on and on. All of these options are totally viable as long as you know how to snake your way from whatever chord you choose to whatever your next target chord is. In the night theme, our big fat 1 is harmonized as the flat 7 of the dominant 2 chord I mentioned earlier. Here's another example. In the second bar of the bridge, the melodies 6 to 5 are both harmonized as the major 7ths of a flat 7 major 7 to flat 6 major 7 progression, as opposed to the day theme's 3. Also of note is the way the night theme changes the rhythm of the melody to better fit the style, which brings us to our final point.
Point number 5. Don't be afraid to change the melody.
What might be the most important factor in a melody sounding like jazz is the rhythm. Notice how the night theme constantly moves the melody notes around into rhythms that are more authentically in the jazz style. This is huge because in most non-jazz songs, the day theme included, the rhythm of the melody would sound really square if you played it in a jazz context. Beyond just the rhythms, you can also change the melody notes themselves. Look at how the night theme raises this measure up a semitone towards the end of the bridge. Now, if you do this too much, the melody won't sound like the original song anymore, which means you can slap your name up in that composer corner and start raking in the sweet, sweet jazz composer dough. But if your goal is to make a reharm, it's better to be very, very careful where you mess with the melody. That's why this only really happens in that 1 bar in this whole theme. Well, that's the video, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions about reharmonization or anything else, just ask me in the comments below, or feel free to tweet them at me at 8-Bit Music Theory. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next week.